In the heart of Africa, where the sun burns mercilessly over endless savannas, shadows once gathered for a war no man could believe. Not between tribes nor armies, but between two forces of nature that had learned to hate each other. 95 baboons, hardened by hunger and rage, stood face to face with 15 lions, kings of the plains. What sparked this battle would echo through time as one of the darkest wars in the wild. It was not just survival, it was vengeance. For years, baboons had watched their young stolen by lions, torn apart before their very eyes. In return, the baboons raided dens, dragging fragile lion cubs into the night. The year was 1978, near the dry riverbeds of Tsavo, Kenya. Witnesses spoke of nights where the cries of infants, human and animal alike, merged with roars and screeches, creating a symphony of terror. What began as isolated attacks soon became an organized campaign. The baboons gathered not in dozens, but in scores. They were preparing for something no lion had ever faced before, a coordinated assault. The lions, led by a massive male known as Marunga, did not retreat. For them, every inch of territory was sacred, every acacia tree and waterhole marked by their ancestors' blood. To abandon the land was to lose their throne, and so they chose to fight. And this is where our story begins. But before we dive deeper into Africa's darkest war, tell me, where are you watching this from? And don't forget to subscribe, because what comes next will leave you speechless. The rivalry did not begin with a single event, but rather with a chain of encounters that escalated over time. In the late 1970s, the Tsavo plains of southeastern Kenya were experiencing a harsh cycle of drought. With prey scarce, lions ventured further than usual in search of food, sometimes targeting vulnerable primates. Baboons, known for their aggression when threatened, began to respond violently when cubs or weaker members of their troops were attacked. This cycle of predation and retaliation planted the seeds of what would later erupt into large-scale conflict. The savanna was a stage of constant tension, with limited waterholes acting as flashpoints. Around these few remaining resources, both lions and baboons were forced into close contact. Lions typically dominated through sheer strength, but the numbers of baboons often gave them an advantage. When a lioness killed a young baboon in 1976 near the Galana River, witnesses recorded the first major retaliatory raid. A troop of more than 50 baboons swarmed a pair of resting lions at dusk, leaving one adult male injured. Such clashes were not yet war, but they set a dangerous precedent. Over the following 2 years, the numbers involved in these encounters grew. By 1978, reports from local rangers indicated that certain baboon troops had begun to gather in unusually large formations, sometimes exceeding 90 individuals. These troops demonstrated coordinated movements, especially at dawn and dusk, that suggested defensive strategies against lions. Their vocalizations became more aggressive, echoing across the plains and creating an atmosphere of constant unrest. The lions, too, were adapting. 15 adults, 8 males and 7 lionesses, had begun to patrol a vast stretch of the Tsavo region, covering more than 60 square kilometers. They hunted wildebeest and zebra when possible, but when herds migrated further east, baboons became easier targets. This relentless pressure hardened the baboons, pushing them to remain close to rocky outcrops and trees where they could launch counterattacks from above. Clashes intensified in early 1978 near the Voi River basin. In one documented incident, a group of baboons hurled rocks and branches down on a lioness attempting to seize an infant. The lioness retreated, but days later, the same troop suffered the loss of 3 juveniles to a coordinated attack by 2 male lions. This cycle of action and reprisal entrenched hostility between the species, transforming ordinary survival into something darker and more destructive. The geography of Tsavo played a decisive role in these hostilities. The vast open plains provided no cover for baboons when they ventured far from trees. while lions risked injury if they pursued their prey into rocky cliffs. Both species exploited these natural features, turning the landscape itself into a weapon. Over time, these battles around terrain shaped the tactics each group employed, with baboons learning to draw lions toward dangerous ground, and lions waiting to ambush them in the grasslands. By mid-1978, rangers noted an unusual increase in carcasses scattered near watering holes. Some were zebra or antelope, but many were baboons and, surprisingly, lions as well. Scars and broken bones suggested direct clashes rather than simple hunts. These findings confirmed that what had begun as isolated predatory encounters had transformed into deliberate confrontations. Thus, by the close of the decade, the stage was set for one of the most violent interspecies conflicts ever recorded on the African continent. Both sides had suffered losses, and neither was willing or able to retreat. The savanna had become a battlefield, and the story of 95 baboons facing 15 lions was no longer a legend in the making, but an inevitability. By late 1978, the baboons of Tsavo began to display behavior rarely seen at such scale. Normally, baboon troops remain within their own territories, competing rather than cooperating with neighboring groups. But faced with the repeated threat of lions, scattered troops started merging. Rangers observed gatherings of unprecedented size, as many as 95 individuals moving together as a single force. This alliance was not born out of choice, but of necessity, a direct response to predation that threatened their survival. The newly formed megatroop was a volatile unit. Dominant males jostled for control, barking challenges and flashing their formidable canines. Yet when lions appeared, rivalries gave way to unity. Young males acted as frontline defenders, charging forward with displays of aggression, while females and juveniles retreated into elevated positions among the rocks. The troop had effectively developed a division of roles that mirrored the tactics of an army, though guided purely by instinct and experience rather than deliberate strategy. Water sources remained the most contested grounds. The baboons soon realized that numbers alone could shift the balance of power at these sites. When 15 lions approached the Ndara Plains waterhole in early 1979, the megatroop assembled en masse. Their chorus of barks and screams echoed across the plain, unnerving even the most seasoned lionesses. The lions eventually withdrew without a fight, a rare retreat that proved to the baboons that unity offered a genuine chance at survival. Strength in numbers also emboldened the troop to reclaim territories once abandoned. Rocky ridges overlooking the Tsavo River became fortified refuges. Here, sentinels kept constant watch, warning the troop of approaching predators. If lions ventured too close, volleys of rocks and branches rained down upon them. Although casualties still occurred, the troop's collective defense inflicted wounds that lions could not ignore. The alliance also altered the troops' foraging patterns. Instead of dispersing in smaller clusters, they moved in a vast wave, overwhelming trees and shrubs in minutes. This left a trail of stripped vegetation, but reduced their exposure to ambush. The lions, accustomed to targeting lone baboons or smaller groups, found these masses far more difficult to penetrate. The savanna landscape itself bore witness to the shift. Stretches of land cleared by relentless foraging now stood as markers of the baboons' growing dominance. Still, unity came at a cost. Food scarcity worsened as 95 individuals competed over the same resources. Squabbles over fruit and insects grew frequent, with weaker members sometimes left behind. The lions, ever watchful, exploited these moments of fragmentation, dragging off the stragglers when the troop was stretched thin. The war had not yet reached its peak, but each skirmish hardened the resolve of both sides. The lions began to adapt in turn. Scouts noted that two dominant males started coordinating more precise ambushes, working to separate sections of the megatroop from the main body. These attacks were costly but effective, forcing the baboons to constantly reorganize and remain vigilant. It was a grim reminder that their alliance, while powerful, was not invincible. By mid-1979, the Baboon Alliance had become both a shield and a burden. They had survived longer and fought harder than ever before, but the lions remained unbroken. Both forces were now locked into a cycle of aggression and reprisal that neither could abandon. What had begun as scattered encounters had escalated into a prolonged campaign, and the true war was only just beginning. The lions of Tsavo had long reigned as apex predators, but by 1979, their dominance was being tested. The presence of a massive troop of 95 baboons disrupted the usual hierarchy of the savanna. Instead of solitary hunts or ambushes against smaller prey, the lions found themselves confronted by an opponent that operated as a collective. 15 lions, 8 males and 7 females, now faced a force unlike anything they had encountered before. Their response would determine whether they could preserve their place at the top of the food chain. The first adjustment came in the form of tighter cohesion. While lions often dispersed into smaller subgroups during hunts, the Tsavo pride began moving more frequently as a single unit. Patrols stretched across wide plains, with males flanking the pride and lionesses maintaining formation at the center. This coordination reduced the risk of being surrounded by the baboons and allowed them to strike with concentrated force. For the first time, lions exhibited behavior that mirrored the organized resistance of their primate adversaries. Ambushes became increasingly sophisticated. 2 dominant males, often sighted near the Voi River basin, developed a pattern of circling wide before rushing a baboon flank. Lionesses followed with swift charges aimed at scattering the younger males who formed the troop's first line of defense. While these tactics did not always result in kills, they succeeded in keeping the baboons under constant pressure, preventing them from growing complacent in their unity. The lions also exploited moments of weakness caused by scarcity. When food was short, the massive troop spread itself thin across foraging grounds. Lionesses, trained in detecting vulnerability, struck quickly at these scattered groups. Several documented kills in early 1980 were juveniles that had lagged behind. These targeted strikes not only reduced the baboons' numbers, but also eroded their ability to maintain cohesion. Waterholes remained a central battleground. In one clash near Aruba Dam, the pride launched a direct assault at dusk. While most of the baboons scrambled to rocky safety, 3 were left exposed on open ground. The lions killed 2 and mauled another before retreating under a hail of thrown rocks. Though losses were suffered on both sides, the lions proved they could still command contested territory. Such victories reinforced their dominance and restored some measure of balance. Physical strength remained the lion's greatest weapon. A single swipe from a male could incapacitate a baboon instantly, and their coordinated roars carried across kilometers, sowing panic before a charge. Unlike the baboons, who relied on numbers and terrain, lions wielded raw power. This contrast highlighted the evolving nature of the conflict, intelligence and unity against muscle and ferocity. The pride also demonstrated remarkable endurance. Injuries inflicted by rocks or bites rarely forced them into permanent retreat. Scarred males continued to patrol, their resilience serving as both a deterrent and a rallying signal. For the baboons, each encounter came with the grim reminder that lions were not easily defeated, even when outnumbered 6-1. By the end of 1980, the lions' response had reshaped the conflict into a war of attrition. They had adapted to the unusual threat posed by the baboons, countering numbers with strength and coordination. Both sides had drawn blood, and neither showed signs of yielding. The savanna was no longer a hunting ground, but a battlefield defined by endurance, strategy, and the will to outlast the other. The first major clashes erupted in early 1981, when the dry season forced both baboons and lions toward the same dwindling sources of water. Around the Galana River, the 95-strong baboon troop had taken control of rocky ridges overlooking the bank. The pride of 15 lions approached cautiously, aware that any mistake could trigger a storm of counterattacks. Tension lingered for hours as both forces observed one another, neither willing to yield. The stalemate broke when a young male baboon ventured too far from cover. A lioness lunged, killing him within seconds. The troop reacted instantly, surging down from the rocks in a coordinated frenzy. Stones and branches rained onto the lions, forcing them to retreat, but not before dragging their kill into the tall grass. It was the first clear sign that the war had entered a new phase. Full-scale confrontations with casualties on both sides. Over the following weeks, similar encounters unfolded. In one clash near the Ndara Plains, a group of baboons cornered a lioness separated from the pride. They overwhelmed her with sheer numbers, biting and clawing until reinforcements arrived. The lioness survived but carried wounds so deep that she limped for months. Rangers later noted the scars, evidence of the rare moment when prey had turned predator into victim. These battles left the savanna littered with remains. Rangers discovered carcasses of both baboons and lions scattered across watering holes, grim markers of the escalating conflict. Unlike normal predator-prey dynamics, where death served the purpose of feeding, many of these kills showed signs of retaliation. Bodies left uneaten, broken bones suggesting violence beyond survival. The war was transforming into a struggle for territory and dominance, not just sustenance. Both species adapted quickly. The baboons tightened their defensive perimeters, rarely allowing juveniles to stray beyond reach. Lions, in turn, refined their ambushes, working in coordinated waves to force baboons into open terrain. Each side studied the other, learning from mistakes, preparing for the next inevitable clash. Survival had given way to strategy, and the savanna became a proving ground for evolution under pressure. By mid-1981, the scale of the conflict drew attention from local communities. Villagers near Tsavo spoke of nights filled with roars and shrieks that echoed for miles. Travelers passing through the park reported seeing entire landscapes deserted, with antelope and zebra fleeing the areas where the battles raged. The war between lions and baboons was reshaping the balance of life across the region. The intensity of these clashes signaled that neither side was backing down. Every victory was temporary, every loss repaid in blood. Lions proved their unmatched strength, while baboons wielded numbers and terrain with relentless persistence. The African night was alive with the sound of war, a struggle etched into the dust and silence of Tsavo. And as we recount these brutal first clashes, a question arises. From where are you watching this forgotten war unfold? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to continue this journey into Africa's darkest conflict, make sure to subscribe and join us as we reveal the battles yet to come. The peak of the conflict came in late 1981, during the height of the dry season. Water levels at the Aruba Dam had fallen so low that animals from across Tsavo gathered at its shrinking pools. It was here, under the scorching sun and amidst the cracked earth, that 95 baboons and 15 lions clashed in what would become the most violent confrontation of the entire war. The baboons had claimed the ridges around the dam, turning the elevated ground into a fortress. From these positions, they could see approaching threats hours before they arrived. But the lions did not come stealthily. They approached as a pride, spread across the plain in a deliberate show of force. Dust clouds rose behind them as they advanced, their roars carrying across the dry wind, warning all creatures nearby that the savanna was theirs to reclaim. The first charge came at dusk. 3 lionesses sprinted directly at the lower slope, targeting the cluster of young males who often formed the troop's outer ring. Chaos erupted as the baboons screamed in unison, scrambling higher up the ridges. Rocks and branches cascaded down in waves, striking one of the lionesses in the face and forcing her to fall back. But 2 others broke through, grabbing a juvenile before vanishing into the tall grass. The troop countered with sheer numbers. Dozens of baboons surged downward, a mass of grey fur and flashing teeth, surrounding a lone male lion caught at the base of the slope. They clawed and bit furiously, leaving deep cuts along his flanks. He roared and swiped, scattering several attackers, but the assault only ceased when two other males rushed to his side, pulling him free from the frenzy. He survived, but his body bore the scars of the closest the baboons had come to killing an adult lion outright. For hours, the confrontation ebbed and flowed. Lions darted in, testing the defenses, while baboons countered from the heights. Dust, screams, and roars blended into one overwhelming chorus of violence. By nightfall, the battlefield was strewn with the bodies of at least 6 baboons and 2 lions. Neither side claimed victory, but the cost of survival was written across the wounded survivors who limped back into the darkness. The aftermath revealed the toll of the battle. Rangers found blood-stained rocks and broken branches scattered across the ridges. Carcasses of baboons lay untouched, evidence that the lions had struck not for food, but for dominance. The bodies of 2 lions, mauled and abandoned, told the same story. This was no hunt, it was war in its purest form. The great confrontation became a turning point. Both species had shown the extent of their resilience, but the losses proved unsustainable. The baboons, though still numerous, had seen their strongest defenders crippled. The lions, despite their power, could not afford to lose adult members of the pride without jeopardizing their future hunts. The war was pushing both sides to their breaking point. This single clash echoed across Tsavo, altering the rhythms of the savanna for months. The once crowded watering holes grew silent, avoided even by other species who sensed the danger. The great confrontation was not only a battle, it was a scar carved into the land, a moment when 2 forces of nature collided with a fury that neither would forget. When dawn broke over Tsavo after the great confrontation, the land bore silent testimony to the violence of the night before. The cracked soil around Aruba Dam was stained with blood, feathers from scavenger birds littered the ground, and carcasses lay exposed under the unforgiving sun. Rangers recorded the scene with unease, realizing they had witnessed one of the most destructive clashes ever documented between 2 species not traditionally locked in such prolonged conflict. For the baboons, survival had come at a heavy cost. Several of their strongest males had been lost, and many others were left with permanent injuries that slowed the troops' movements. The mega-troop of 95, once formidable, was now fractured into smaller subgroups. The pressure of sustaining so many mouths, combined with mounting casualties, forced them to scatter across the landscape in search of safer grounds. Unity, which had been their shield, was beginning to erode. The lions, too, suffered greatly. 2 adult males were confirmed dead, their bodies found torn and bloodied, while others carried wounds that would never fully heal. The loss of prime hunters threatened the pride's stability. Lionesses, burdened with both hunting and defending cubs, faced immense strain. Though they had inflicted damage on the baboons, their own numbers were no longer sufficient to press for dominance without risk of collapse. In the months that followed, the savanna itself seemed quieter. The great roars and massed screams that once echoed across the plains faded into isolated skirmishes. Both sides avoided large-scale confrontations, perhaps instinctively recognizing the futility of further escalation. The war, as some rangers later called it, had reached a stalemate. Neither baboons nor lions could claim victory, and both had been weakened by the struggle. Local communities carried the memory of the conflict in oral stories. Villagers near Tsavo spoke of nights when the ground trembled with the sound of war, and guides recounted to travelers the time when baboons and lions clashed like armies. Over the years, the tale became part of the region's lore, a reminder of nature's capacity for both survival and destruction. For researchers, the aftermath offered lessons about adaptation and resilience. The baboons had demonstrated that unity could counter even the apex predator of Africa, while the lions had shown remarkable flexibility in their hunting and defensive strategies. Yet the cost was undeniable. Dozens of lives lost, ecological disruption, and a scar left on the balance of the savanna. By the early 1980s, As rainfall returned and water sources expanded, both species slowly reverted to more typical patterns. Baboons reformed into smaller traditional troops, while the lion pride reorganized around surviving leaders. The war did not resume with the same intensity. Instead, it lingered as memory, shaping behaviors and territories for years to come. The legacy of this dark conflict is not measured in victory or defeat, but in its stark reminder. In times of scarcity, even nature's most enduring rhythms can fracture into violence. The Battle of Tsavo remains one of the rare moments when survival drove two species into open war, leaving behind a story etched forever in Africa's wilderness. As years passed, the memory of the Great War between baboons and lions in Tsavo transformed into something larger than fact. Rangers who had witnessed the clashes retired, their stories carried forward in hushed tones. Guides spoke of nights when 95 baboons stood against 15 lions, and travelers retold the accounts with awe. What began as a brutal struggle for survival gradually became legend, a tale that blurred the line between history and myth. Within local traditions, the conflict was interpreted as a lesson about balance. Elders described how the land itself seemed to recoil from the violence, how the watering holes grew silent after the battles, and how both species eventually withdrew rather than destroy one another completely. The war was remembered not as a victory for either side, but as a warning that unchecked rivalry leads only to ruin. For scientists and researchers, the story of Tsavo offered unique insight. Here was evidence that ecological pressures could push two powerful species into direct conflict on a scale rarely seen. The war illustrated how scarcity, drought, and territorial overlap can alter natural dynamics, producing events that might never repeat in the same way. It became a case study in adaptation, resilience, and the limits of competition in the wild. The lions that survived carried the scars, and their descendants continued to patrol Tsavo's plains with the same vigilance. The baboons, though no longer united in such vast numbers, maintained a cautious distance whenever lion roars echoed through the night. Both species adjusted, shaped by a memory that outlived the individuals who fought. The landscape itself bore the imprint of their struggle. By the late 1980s, the story of Tsavo's darkest war had spread far beyond Africa. Wildlife documentaries and conservation reports mentioned it, fueling curiosity among those who had never set foot on the savanna. Though details blurred and numbers shifted in retellings, the essence remained. A time when nature revealed its harshest truth, that survival is never guaranteed, even for the strongest. Today, the tale resonates as more than a natural history. It stands as a symbol of endurance, of the thin line between dominance and collapse, and of the ways in which the natural world mirrors struggles for power seen across civilizations. The Battle of Tsavo remains a reminder that survival often demands sacrifice, and that even legends are born from blood and silence. The myth endures because it asks timeless questions. What happens when strength meets numbers, when instinct collides with strategy, and when the land itself forces rivals into war? Who truly wins? The answers remain unsettled, echoing through the savanna long after the dust has settled. And now, as you reflect on this forgotten war, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed traveling through Africa's darkest chapter of survival, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next journey into the untold stories of the wild.